We're rolling. All right. So here we go. So as I was saying, you'll notice some big similarities between mitosis and meiosis. Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, all those stages, as you saw yesterday, are there. Okay. Now, the biggest difference is the type of cells this process happens to. And a lot of times in this class, and I'm super guilty of it, and it's okay because it's familiar to you. But a lot of times in this class, I talk in terms of human stuff, right? I'll say like in your cells, or in our bodies, or our proteins, or our carbohydrates, or blah, 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 blah. But don't forget, don't lose sight that, remember, it's biology, right? It's not just human biology, it's all living things. So when we're talking about this process today that is meiosis, that is how we get more sex cells, we're talking about all sexually reproducing organisms. So any organism that reproduces sexually will use this process of meiosis. That includes plants. Some of you like right now are blowing your plants reproduce sexually? Yeah, their pollen is like sperm. They have eggs in their ovum. Okay, the pollen meets the egg, bam, it makes a seed, right? Okay, so again, that would be an example of sexual reproduction. So all sexually reproducing organisms, even though we might focus on the human aspect of it, they will go through this process of meiosis. So that answers the very first question. Okay, so what types of cells does this happen to? Well, it happens to what we call our gametes. Okay, our gametes it's a fancy word for our sex cells. So again, when you're talking about humans, that would be your sperm cells for males and what are called your ovum or your eggs for females. Okay? And so this process is how we get these types of cells. Right? And like I said, you're going to notice some very similar things to mitosis. But there's some key differences because like we said yesterday, do we want our sex cells to be all genetically identical? No, of course not. Because again, you'd marry somebody and every time you had a baby with them, it would be a clone of that. The next kid, a clone. Next kid, a clone. It'd be the same as that kid every single time. And that doesn't really help a species out because a species does well when there's variation among the species, when there's lots of differences in the species. Okay? So meiosis helps us get that genetic variation, right? So that's what we're going to look at today, how this all occurs. So one thing, and there's a couple key words up here, we'll go through some of it, but I'll refer, and you'll see it referred to, the process of meiosis as something called reduction division. Because here's the thing, when you start the process of meiosis, you're starting it with a body cell. It's not like, for males, it's not like sperm cell are just replicating and making new sperm cell. Sperm cells don't come from other sperm cells. Sperm cells come from something called a spermatocyte, or a germ cell that is an actual body cell that then divides out into a sperm cell. Okay? So that's one of the big things that's why it's called reduction division. You're reducing the number of chromosomes in the cell, okay, by dividing the cell out. All right. Another key term here. We already talked about gametes. Gametes, that fancy word for sex cells. Homologous chromosomes. That's another big idea that you got to understand. So homologous chromosomes are basically your matching set of chromosomes. So again, using humans, we have 46 chromosomes, right? Okay, and all of our body cells, we have 46 chromosomes. You got 23 of those chromosomes from the egg that was inside your mommy. You got the other 23 chromosomes from the sperm that came from your daddy that met that egg. So you are made up of 23 chromosomes from mommy, 23 chromosomes from daddy, and those matching sets, chromosome site number 1, the matching set for site 1, that's a homologous set of chromosomes. Site number 2, the matching set, homologous chromosomes, and so on and so on and so on. So what's amazing is site number 1, I'm making this up, I don't really know, but site number 1, let's say part of that chromosome codes for your hair color. So ta-da, site number 1, one from mom, one from dad, bam, blonde hair. Site number 2, one from mom, one from dad, bam, you're going to be 6 feet tall. Site number 3, one from mom, one from dad, bam, you're going to have dark skin or whatever, okay? And so these combinations of these homologous chromosomes that you got from mommy and daddy give you all your traits. Okay, that mixture of those chromosomes, they match up, and then they, ta-da, give you the traits that you have. Okay, so that's why you're kind of you might look a little bit like your dad, look a little bit like your mom. Maybe you favor one or the other. We'll talk about that more next week as far as, well, why do I look more like my dad, or why do I look more like my mom, and that kind of thing. We'll get into that next week as far as the actual traits. But that's what homologous chromosomes mean. You're going to see that word homologous a lot over the next few weeks, so just make sure we understand. It's the matching set, okay? All right, so we need to talk about this word here, this diploid, and then there's another word, haploid, okay? So looking at these two words, again, using humans as kind of a starting point. Diploid and haploid refer to your cells. Your diploid cells are your body cells. And more specifically, the words diploid and haploid refer to the number of chromosomes in those cells. So your body cells have 46 chromosomes. So your diploid number for your body cells is 46. Your haploid cells are your gametes. Your haploid cells are your sex cells. So think about the word haploid. It sounds kind of like half. So your chromosome number for your haploid cells is half of your diploid number. And that's true for any sexually reproducing organism. So right, for us, it's 23. Our haploid number is 23. Our diploid number is 46. If I said a grizzly bear has a diploid number of 80, what would its haploid number be?
40.
40. If I said a Guadalupe black bass has a diploid number of 100, what would its haploid number be?
50.
50. So you kind of catch on to the idea, right? The other thing about diploid and haploid is they're represented by symbols. So 2N means diploid. N means haploid. So if you saw on a quiz or you're reading a worksheet or something and it says, what's a human's 2N number? 46. It's referring to the diploid number. If it said, what's a human's N number? 23. It's referring to the haploid number. Now, again, why is this important to meiosis? Well, because the goal of meiosis is to make haploid cells. We want to make gametes, right? We want to make cells that have half the number of chromosomes, so when they meet up, when the egg and sperm meet up, bam, now it has that first zygote, that first cell of the baby has 46. Okay? Does that make sense? Because if our sex cells had 46 chromosomes, then that means the baby would have 92, and that doesn't work out. So that's why meiosis is so important, to reduce the number of chromosomes in those sex cells, so it's 23 and 23. Okay? So are we with me so far? Homologous means matching set. Haploid, diploid. Diploid refers to body cell and the chromosomes that your body cells would have. Haploid refers to your sex cells and the number of chromosomes they would have. So right now, quiz each other, give about 30 seconds, kind of chew on that. Think about it, talk with each other a little bit about homologous, haploid, diploid. 30 seconds. On your mark, get set, go.
Keep on fighting till the end. We are the champions. We are the champions. No time to lose. We are the champions of the world.
All right, and back with me. Yes, sir.
So diploid is body chromosomes or body cells?
It's referring to the number of chromosomes in your body cells. Okay? So it's referring to the number of chromosomes found in your somatic or your body cells. Because remember, somatic, just like gamete is a fancy word for your sex cells, somatic is a fancy word for your body cells. Okay? Alright, so now let's start looking at the actual steps of meiosis. And this is where it'll go a little bit quicker because it's really, really similar to the steps of mitosis. You're going to see a lot of the same stuff, okay? So it involves two distinct divisions. Kind of think about it like the first movie and then a sequel. So meiosis 1 is kind of the original. Meiosis 2 would be the sequel. Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase happens once, and then prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase happens again. That's meiosis 1, that's meiosis 2. By the end of meiosis 2, the one diploid cell, now again, I used to be confused with this, to be honest. Remember, I said, a sperm cell doesn't enter meiosis. It's not a sperm cell becoming more sperm cells, or an egg cell becoming more egg cells. It's a specialized body cell called a germ cell that enters meiosis to become a gamete. Okay? So you start with a diploid cell, and by the end of meiosis 2, you have 4 genetically different haploid cells. Okay? So our questions to answer is, 1, how do we get 4 of them? And 2, how are they genetically different? We answer those 2 questions as we go through the process, you'll be golden. Okay? Alright. So the first thing that happens for meiosis 1 is interphase. Interphase still does occur one time. It only happens before prophase 1, basically. DNA is replicated again. Okay? So if you look up here, okay, I kind of did a little just so we can follow along. So here's the original cell entering, right? Here would be like interphase. Okay? So these chromosomes doubled. So see, now they're still joined together, but they doubled up. All right? So now there's 1, 2 chromosomes. Now there's 1, 2, 3, 4 total chromosomes. The only kind of weird thing is, and I wrote it out over here. Remember when we talked about mitosis, we said these, like the little legs were called chromatids, and that whole thing is called a chromosome. A chromatid attached together still equals 1 chromosome. So I know I know. This would be considered a chromosome. This would still be considered a chromosome. 2 chromatids, I know it's weird, you still call just 1 chromosome. Okay? Stay with me as we go through it. I think it'll work itself out to where it'll make sense. Okay? So there's interphase. We replicated the DNA. Okay? Because that's what happens in interphase. All right? So now we're going to go into prophase 1. And prophase 1, probably one of the most important things occurs. So if you hear nothing else, there it is. If you hear nothing else today, you've got to hear what happens during prophase 1. So prophase 1 is where we get the genetic variation for our 4 eventual haploid cells. What happens is a process called crossing over. And it is literally what it sounds like. The chromosomes, the little pieces of chromosomes, these chromatids here, okay? So again, if you're still confused with the whole chromatid versus chromosome, that would be a chromatid. That would be a chromatid. That whole thing you would call a chromosome. But when it's just hanging out, it would just be one of those legs, okay? And you could call that a chromosome as well. So anyway, way to go science. Confuse everyone. So crossing over. Here's what happens during crossing over. The chromosomes literally cross over each other and they exchange genetic information. So now instead of being identical, you're going to get genetic variety in these new cells that are formed. So what literally happens, just to kind of give you a weird visual, if Corbin and I shook hands, and motion. So if we shook hands,
Okay.
you got to moisturize. So if we shook hands, my arm would become his, and his arm would become mine. That's what happens during crossing over. Okay? So that's the whole idea. They're exchanging literal pieces of their genes to where then we get genetic variation. Okay? So shake our heads. Yeah? Does that sort of make sense? Yes.
Wouldn't that just make them both the same, so just switching sides?
Well, they're not just switching sides. Like one little piece here, one little piece there. You're going to see a visual here in a second that'll hopefully make a little bit more sense. So look at this next page right here. Bam. Okay. So see how? So here's your here's your daddy chromosome, and it's all orange. Here's your mommy chromosome, and it's all like purplish, right? So they cross over, and look, now you have orange with a little bit of purple. You have purple with a little bit of orange. Okay, and really what's going to happen is that's going to separate. So you're going to have one all orange. That's going to separate. You're going to have orange, a little bit of purple at the bottom. So there's two cells that are different from each other. That's going to separate. You're going to have purple at the top and a little bit of orange on the bottom. Third different cell. And then that's going to separate, and you're going to have your fourth cell with all purple. So 1, 2, 3, 4 cells, all genetically different. Okay? And next time it happens, maybe they exchange up top, or maybe a little piece in the middle, or maybe a little piece right there, or maybe a little piece over here. So every time crossing over occurs, they can exchange at different little points. Okay? Is that cleared up a little bit? I think that image helps a little bit to see it. Okay? All right. So now it's going to be real similar. Now metaphase occurs. Metaphase 1. How do you know it's 1? Well, it's only happening to one cell. So metaphase occurs. You get line up in the middle. Metaphase middle, just like mitosis. Metaphase, line up in the middle. So the only difference is, notice that they're in their pairs. So they're not lined up single file like in mitosis. They're lined up in their pairs still, but it's still they're lined up in the middle. Now anaphase is going to happen. Anaphase away. So now the chromosomes are going away from each other. Okay. Telophase, and now this is the end of meiosis 1, but telophase occurs. Cell separates, okay? And you have 2 cells. But are we done? No, we got to go through the whole thing one more time. Because what's the end result? Is the end result 2 cells or 4 cells? 4 cells. Yay, way to go. 2 out of 30. Yeah, 4 cells is the end result, okay? So, here we go again. So now, the end result of meiosis 1, you get 2 haploid cells. So if you look here, here's the end result of meiosis 1. Okay? So here's our 2 haploid cells. So now they're going to enter meiosis 2, go through it all, and then the end result's going to be 4 haploid cells. Okay? All right? So now they go through it again. Again, no more DNA replication though. Interphase doesn't occur again. It just goes straight into meiosis 2. Yeah?
So once they switched in meiosis 1, they switch again in meiosis 2?
No. Crossing over only happens once as well. Great question. So crossing over only happens during prophase 1. Doesn't happen again. The rest of it is a breeze. So prophase 2, chromosomes attached to the spindle fiber. Metaphase 2, line up in the middle. Okay, but now how many cells do we have? 2 cells. So all the prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase 2 happens to 2 cells. That's, again, kind of the big difference, right? So anaphase 2, chromosomes go away from each other. Okay, opposite ends. And then telophase 2, now your new cells are forming. Okay, and again, what's your end result of meiosis? 4 genetically different cells. Why are they genetically different? Because of the process of crossing over. So crossing over is what makes them genetically different. Okay? There you have it. Now, last little piece. When you're talking about humans and how our gametes actually form, there's a little bit of a difference between males and females. Okay? For males, when what are called spermatocytes, those are the specialized cell that goes through meiosis to become sperm. When our spermatocytes enter the process, it creates 4 actual different sperm cells. Okay? That process of the spermatocyte becoming 4 sperm cells is called spermatogenesis through meiosis. Okay? And there you see, you actually get 4 actual sperm cells. Now, with females, it's a little bit different. With females, theirs are called oocytes. Okay, oocytes, oocytes. Those are the cells that enter meiosis to become an egg. But when meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 happen, specifically telophase, the cells don't divide evenly. More cytoplasm goes into one of the cells both times. So what you get is actually only 1 egg. You still get 4 cells. Don't think like, oh, Strouch, you just freaking lied to us. I thought you said 4 cells happened. You still get 4 cells, but only 1 of them is a viable egg. The other 3 are what are called polar bodies, and they are just reabsorbed by your body. You never even know they're there. The other interesting thing about females is they are born with all the oocytes that you're ever going to have. Males, our bodies are constantly producing sperm through the spermatogenesis cycle. But for females, you're born with all of the oocytes you're ever going to have. And what's even cooler is, like, when you're in your mother's womb, they're going through meiosis, but they stop after meiosis 1. And then when you reach puberty, they start back up again and start going through meiosis 2, and that's when you start having your cycle and releasing the egg once a month. So it's kind of a pretty fascinating thing. But anyway, that is the difference in how our gametes are actually formed. And that brings us to the end. All right, sweet. Way to go. We made it. Now, stop the recording.